Remember that the CIA introduced LSD to the country anyway, inadvertently and by accident. According to Dr. Hoffman, who invented it, the LSD, the Russians ordered 50 doses for experiment, and somebody in Switzerland from the CIA made a mistake and got the decimal wrong and thought it was 50 million doses. And so the U.S. ordered 50 million doses and started Project MacArthur. And this is directly from the horse's mouth, Dr. Albert Hoffman, over dinner table in Switzerland.
And your description of the easy fashion in which LSD can be cured, the testimony that we had before the committee that it's quite easily cured in New York also, and the fact that the government source, the legitimate source, at the same time has been dried up really doesn't make a great deal of sense.
What Gore did was take it out of the hands of the secret police, so to speak, the secret intelligence agencies who were using it as a war drug, and to see to Project MK-Naomi, and had democratized it, opened it up, and given people in their hands and told them what they were getting, instead of flipping it to them secretly.
I'm not suggesting that everybody goes and makes LSD. What I'm suggesting is that it would be well that we make a major effort to stamp out the black market sources of LSD in a really organized way, really deal with it effectively.
All right, welcome my friends. Good to have you all with us today. My name is Henrik Palmgren and we are coming to you through our website redicecreations.com. And today we are going to talk about biological warfare, the CIA's experimentation with LSD, and the case of Dr. F.Olson and his murder. He was a U.S. Army scientist who specialized in aerobiology. That basically means the delivery of deadly viruses and infectious microorganisms through sprays and aerosol cans. In other words, we are talking about germ warfare here. F.Olson died under mysterious circumstances while undertaking this secret research with the U.S. Army back in 1953. And probably was subjected to some kind of mind control as well. That is one of the speculations here. We'll talk more about this later on as well. But we do have H.B. Albarelli Jr. with us today, who has written a number of groundbreaking articles for WorldNet Daily, including several on the Olson case, as well as topics such as anthrax, Cuba, child abuse, and intelligence matters. He works in the legal profession and was a member of the Carter administration. He has a book out right now called A Terrible Mistake, The Murder of F.Olson and the CIA's Secret Cold War Experiments. And this is what we're going to discuss more in detail here today. The website that you can go to find more information is simply aterriblemistake.com. That's aterriblemistake.com, where you can read more about the book. You can order it through that website. You can also see some of the photographs, articles, and much more up there. So with that, welcome to Red Ice Radio. Hank Albarelli, thank you for joining us on the program.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here, and I thank you very much, Heinrich, for the opportunity to talk with you today.
Thank you, Hank. Very good to have you with us, and we're obviously interested very much in the F.Olson case. It's been coming up here and there, just by as a side note, I guess, in a lot of the both material that we have on the website, but also in terms of what we talked with other guests about. It's come up as one of these mysterious and strange cases that has links to, as I mentioned in the introduction, deadly viruses, infectious microorganism, and germ warfare and all this. But why don't you begin? Just tell us a little bit about yourself and basically when you started researching the case of F.Olson, Hank.
Sure. I actually started researching the case about, I think it would be 16 or 17 years ago. From 2010. I didn't seriously begin researching the case and writing the book until about 10 years ago. But there's actually an interesting story, and I'll try to abbreviate it a little bit about how I became interested in the case. I had lived and worked in Washington, D.C. for about 10 years. And my daughter was getting older. She was in third grade. So we moved, my family moved from out of the city, out of D.C., to the suburbs of Maryland, where it was where crime was a little less and the schools were a little bit better than they were in D.C., the public schools. And one day I had picked my daughter up after school, and we had gone to a fast food restaurant to get some French fries and a Coke. And my daughter happened to look around, and she leaned across the table and said, "Dad, don't look now, but we're the only normal people in this restaurant." And much to her dismay, I looked around, and she was absolutely right. The restaurant maybe had about 10 or 12 people in it, but every person apart from us was rather peculiar. And I had no idea why. And about two or 3 days later, I mentioned the experience to a neighbor, and my neighbor said, "Oh, those are the people from Spring Grove Hospital." He said a lot of those people were LSD subjects in experiments conducted by the government. And of course, having grown up during the 60s and the 70s, I knew what LSD was, but I really had no idea at the time that this was 13 years ago, that the government or anyone for that matter had conducted experiments with LSD, because the hospital that he mentioned, Spring Grove Hospital, is actually formerly known as the Maryland Psychiatric Institute. Mm. So that really piqued my curiosity, and I started researching casually those experiments. And then, strictly by coincidence, about a month later, there was an article in the Washington Post about Frank Olson's body being exhumed from his grave in Frederick, Maryland, and his surviving sons had decided, before reburying the body, to conduct a forensic examination of his death, because they had long suspected foul play, despite the fact that the Frank Olson's death had been ruled a suicide officially by the New York coroner and the U.S. Army. And that story piqued my curiosity also, because I had remembered a few years beforehand when Olson's suicide had been revealed through the report of the Rockefeller Commission appointed by President Gerald Ford, and the shocking detail that allegedly precipitated his suicide was the alleged fact that he had been dosed with LSD about 9 days before he jumped out of a hotel window in New York City in November of 1953. So both those instances sort of tied together. And after I spent maybe 2 or 3 months researching Olson's death, I came to the conclusion that absolutely nothing whatsoever made sense about his death. And so I made the decision to really begin to dig into it. And at the time, I thought maybe I was going to simply write an article, maybe a 10,000-word article, but it turned into a 10-year project.
There you go. Sheesh. So about 10 years in the making, and a little bit previously as well that you mentioned. But what can you, if we go back then and give our listeners a little bit of an overview of some of the things that Frank Olson was involved in? I mentioned a little bit briefly about what he did in terms of germ-warfare, that he did certain research programs with the U.S. Army. But what more can you say about Frank, Hank?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, what you just